Imagine a world where the mere act of attempting to trim a tree could trigger an international showdown and possibly lead to war. This isn't a plot from a Cold War thriller. It's a real historical event. Prepare to delve into the intriguing and almost unbelievable story of the Korean axe murder incident and Operation Paul Bunyan, a tale of tension, tragedy, and trees in the most militarized border on Earth. Our story unfolds in the Korean Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ, a buffer zone created on the Korean peninsula. It's a land where time seems frozen in a tense armistice, dividing the Korean peninsula along the 38th parallel. But within this no man's land lies a unique area, the Joint Security Area, or JSA, in Panmunjom, where North and South Korean forces stand face to face. Here, a seemingly ordinary 30-meter poplar tree stood at the center of an extraordinary international crisis. This now famous tree in the summer of 1976 was more than just a part of the landscape. It blocked the line of sight between a United Nations Command, or UNC checkpoint, and an observation post. In the chess game of military strategy, visibility is king, and this tree was an unwitting pawn, obscuring crucial views in one of the world's most sensitive areas. The JSA, a neutral ground where discussions between the two Koreas were held, was no stranger to tension, but the events of August 18, 1976, escalated these tensions to a new level. On this day, a routine task turned deadly when a work party, accompanied by American and South Korean soldiers, set out to trim the tree. Little did they know this simple act of maintenance would spark a violent confrontation, testing the fragile peace of the DMZ. The tree's presence at this location wasn't just a quirk of nature. It was a legacy of the armistice that ended the Korean War, a war that technically hadn't concluded. This tree, in the shadow of the Bridge of No Return, symbolized much more than its branches and leaves. It stood as a living reminder of the divided Korean peninsula, a symbol of the ongoing conflict, and a trigger point for one of the most bizarre and perilous incidents of the Cold War era. On the morning of August 18, 1976, what was intended to be a routine operation in the Joint Security Area took a tragic turn. A group of United Nations Command personnel, including U.S. Army officers Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett, embarked on a mission to trim the obstructive branches of the poplar tree. This task, seemingly mundane, was about to become a flashpoint in the tense history of the Korean peninsula. As the soldiers began their work, the atmosphere was as usual, with the ever-present watchful eyes of North Korean soldiers. However, the situation rapidly deteriorated. North Korean troops, commanded by senior officials, confronted the UNC team. The North Koreans demanded a halt to the tree trimming, claiming the tree held sentimental value, reportedly planted by North Korean leader Kim Il-sung himself. When the UNC team continued their work, the situation escalated beyond a mere standoff. In a shocking burst of violence, the North Korean soldiers attacked. Captain Boniface and Lieutenant Barrett were targeted. Boniface was knocked to the ground and then bludgeoned to death by at least 5 North Koreans. Barrett, in an attempt to escape, leapt over a wall but tragically fell into a concealed depression filled with trees, out of sight from his fellow soldiers. The attack was brutal and swift, lasting barely 30 seconds, but its impact was profound. Amidst the chaos, the UNC force managed to disperse the North Korean guards and place Boniface's body in their truck. However, Barrett was nowhere to be seen. The UNC guards observed North Korean soldiers behaving peculiarly near the area where Barrett had disappeared, igniting fears about his fate. After a tense 90 minutes, the grim reality was uncovered. A search and rescue squad discovered Barrett grievously wounded by axe-wielding North Korean soldiers. Tragically, he succumbed to his injuries on the journey to a hospital in Seoul. This incident, brutal and unexpected, sent shockwaves through the military and diplomatic channels. It wasn't just an attack on soldiers, it was a direct challenge to the UNC's presence in the DMZ, and an act that threatened to upend the fragile peace on the Korean peninsula. The fallout from the axe murder incident was immediate and intense. The killings not only sparked outrage, but also brought the Korean peninsula back to the brink of military escalation. In the hours following the attack, the United States and its allies grappled with how to respond. The American forces in South Korea quickly ramped up to DEFCON 3, indicating a heightened state of readiness. This move signaled the seriousness with which the US military viewed the attack. The CIA concluded that the assault had been premeditated by the North Korean government, adding a layer of gravity to the situation. A variety of military responses were considered, including rocket and artillery attacks. However, these were eventually discounted, partly due to South Korean President Park Chung-hee's desire to avoid direct military action. Simultaneously, North Korean media began broadcasting their version of events. They portrayed the UNC personnel as aggressors who had entered the joint security area and initiated the conflict. This narrative starkly contrasted with the events witnessed and those reported by the United Nations Command. The international community watched with bated breath as tensions escalated in the region. The incident had not only brought the long-standing Korean conflict back into the global spotlight, but also posed a serious threat to the already fragile armistice. In response to the shocking axe murder incident, the United Nations Command, with the United States and South Korea at the helm, orchestrated Operation Paul Bunyan, a meticulously planned demonstration of force. This operation, named after the legendary American lumberjack, was more than a mere military maneuver. It was a symbolic act of defiance and a statement of resilience. On August 21st, 3 days after the brutal killings, Operation Paul Bunyan was set into motion. At 07 o'clock, without prior warning to North Korea, a convoy of 23 American and South Korean vehicles named Task Force Vieira, after Lieutenant Colonel Victor S. Vieira, the commander of the United States Army Support Group, rolled into the joint security area. This was not just any task force. It was a formidable show of military might, including engineers, infantry, and special forces, all backed by a strategic assembly of air power. As Task Force Vieira arrived at the site, the operation's scale and preparation became evident. Helicopters and Air Force jets loomed over the horizon, a vivid display of Allied air superiority. The message was clear. This was not just about trimming a tree. It was a demonstration to North Korea that aggression would be met with overwhelming force. The North Korean response to this display was initially one of surprise. Intelligence reports suggested that the accumulation of force had taken them aback. Quickly, they mobilized their troops, setting up machine gun positions, silently observing as the tree that had sparked the incident was methodically felled in 42 minutes, 3 minutes less than estimated. Throughout the operation, the UNC maintained a strict discipline to prevent escalation. The tree, once a point of contention, was reduced to a 6-meter-tall stump, deliberately left standing as a stark reminder of the incident and the resolve of the UNC. In an act of further defiance, South Korean troops dismantled 2 North Korean guard posts in the area. Operation Paul Bunyan, while peacefully executed, signified a critical juncture in the Cold War-era Korean conflict. It demonstrated the willingness of the US and South Korea to confront aggression, while carefully avoiding a full-scale military confrontation. The Korean axe murder incident and Operation Paul Bunyan unfolded against the backdrop of the Cold War, a period marked by geopolitical tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, with Korea standing as a front line of this global standoff. The incident was not merely a local skirmish, but a symbol of the larger ideological and military contest that defined the era. The Korean Peninsula, split into 2 ideologically opposed nations since the end of World War II, had already witnessed the devastating Korean War. Although the war ended with an armistice in 1953, peace was never formally declared, leaving North and South Korea technically still at war. The DMZ, which was initially meant to be a buffer zone, often became a flashpoint for conflicts, epitomizing the uneasy peace that characterized the peninsula. Operation Paul Bunyan, while a show of strength, was also a carefully calibrated exercise in restraint. It was a message that while the US and South Korea would not tolerate unprovoked aggression, they also sought to avoid full-scale war. The incident and its aftermath had a lasting impact on inter-Korean relations and the politics of the region. It was a stark reminder of the ongoing tensions in Korea and the broader Cold War context, where global peace hung in a precarious balance. The reverberations of the Korean axe murder incident and Operation Paul Bunyan were felt long after the poplar tree was felled. One of the most immediate and tangible changes was within the joint security area itself. In the aftermath of the incident, measures were implemented to reduce the likelihood of such confrontations occurring again. The most notable of these was the physical separation of North Korean and United Nations command forces within the JSA, a step taken to prevent direct contact and reduce the chances of spontaneous incidents. Beyond the JSA, the incident had a profound impact on the military and diplomatic strategies of the involved parties. It became a symbol of the unpredictable and volatile nature of the North-South Korean relationship, as well as the broader East-West geopolitical struggle. The incident also found its way into the cultural and historical narrative of the Korean conflict. Artifacts from the event, such as the axe and axe handle allegedly used in the attack, were preserved and displayed in the North Korea Peace Museum. Additionally, notable figures involved in the operation went on to prominent positions. Moon Jae-in, for instance, who participated in Operation Paul Bunyan as part of the South Korean Special Forces, later became the 12th president of South Korea. As we reflect on the Korean Axe murder incident and Operation Paul Bunyan, it becomes clear how a single, seemingly small event can escalate into a significant international issue. This story reminds us of the delicate balance between diplomatic negotiation and military strength in maintaining peace. It begs the question, in today's world, how do we navigate such fine lines to prevent history from repeating itself? Share your thoughts in the comments below and have a lovely day.